Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to part 3 of the StarWisdom astrology course. And today's lesson is going to be taught by Uranus, and this is my Uranus hat. So I like this hat for Uranus because it's unusual. It's a little bit eccentric, and it has this sort of this sense of, the third eye, like seeing beyond in a way. And Uranus was discovered in the mid 18th century only because the progress of the science of telescopes and lenses had got to a point where they could see beyond Saturn. Up until the mid 18th century, nobody knew that anything existed beyond Saturn. Saturn was considered to be the boundary of the universe. Imagine, from the very dawn of human history, Saturn was considered the boundary of our solar system, of the universe. So think about like the psychological change that must have happened at that time when suddenly they saw beyond. It was almost like seeing beyond death, because Saturn, as the boundary up until that point, had represented death. Also represented the skin, it's the boundaries of your body. And so it was like being able to see beyond death. And Saturn also at that time corresponded very much to the church. And people were starting to question the church's authority. Science had become something separate to religion. Uranus is very much about science and new discoveries and technology. And so we had this sense of going beyond what was known into this unknown. This must have been extraordinary for people at the time. The sense of moving into a very different dimension, like moving into outer space. And at that time, they discovered electricity, which is very much ruled by Uranus. And it was the start of the Industrial Revolution, new technologies, that's very Uranian. As I said, there was this separation of the church from science, and science is governed by Uranus. So there was this split into the secular and the religious. This was something totally new, that we were not totally governed by God, that human beings could actually create independently of God. This was something very, very new. And of course, we had a whole new energy source. That's why the Industrial Revolution was able to flourish so much, because of the of coal and the ability to create energy. And Uranus is also very much about energy. And it corresponds to anything that is new and different and a bit eccentric. So when you think about Uranus, think about this hat, and it's something unusual, something different, something rare, something quirky, and also this intelligence. In fact, one of the key phrases for Uranus is universal intelligence or universal creativity. It was like being able to go beyond the thinking mind and to access new information. Now, obviously, there'd always been quite Uranian characters, like genius type characters. But this was a completely different exploration, explosion. In fact, up until that point, there was a society in London that you could only join if you knew everything there was to know. Can you imagine everything there is to know now? And once this breakthrough happened in technology and science, it became impossible to know everything there was to know anymore. It became, the universe became unlimited, it became infinite. So Uranus has an orbit of 84 years. It takes 84 years to go around the sun. So you can imagine how far away it is from Saturn, because Saturn has an orbit of 30 years. And so Uranus spends roughly 7 years in each sign. Now it's currently in Taurus, but Uranus is about change. It's about exploding and exploring something new, different. And Taurus is a fixed earth sign. It likes things to be settled and stable. So this combination of Uranus and Taurus on the surface doesn't look great. But remember, we always have to look at high vibration and low vibration. So low vibration, Uranus in Taurus, is like earthquakes, sudden breaking of the earth. Uranus is anything sudden, unexpected. If you have a Uranus aspect, something is happening in. If you have a Uranus transit, and we'll be looking at those later, then you can expect something to change in your life. If you don't do it willingly, then the universe will slap you around the face and will pull the rug out from under your feet and make you change. But if you can see that Uranus, you've got this Uranus aspect coming, then you can go, oh, I've got a Uranus aspect coming. I need to change something. What do I need to change? And it can be phenomenal for creative activities because it's about universal creativity, universal intelligence. So at low vibration, we're looking at like earthquakes, sudden unexpected disruptions. Maybe we break something in our body, a bone or something like that. At high vibration, we're working with, and we're saying, okay, the soil, the planetary soil needs assistance. It needs help. We need to change the way that we're farming. So we have this, resurgence of permaculture and organic farming, of putting food back into the soil, nurturing the soil. There's all this thing about the mycelium web. It's all very much about the soil. And again, mycelium is about community, it's about connecting. And it's really been big in the last few years while Uranus has been in Taurus. About 5 or 6 years that Uranus has been in Taurus. And Taurus also represents money. So if you think about Uranus as new technology, and we've had blockchain, cryptocurrency, we've had disruption to the monetary system. And so when we look for, especially these slow moving planets, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and they stay in a sign for Saturn 2.5 years, Uranus about 7 years, Neptune about 10 years, and Pluto anything up to over 30 years, we're looking at what is going on in the general environment that corresponds to that sign at both low vibration and high vibration, because there'll always be a spectrum of what is going on, and we're doing our best to work at that high vibration. So these are very much the qualities of Uranus. I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll start looking in a bit more depth. So if we go back to our 10-lesson plan, you can see Uranus sitting here in the blue area. Neptune was lesson 1, Pluto was lesson 2. So Neptune was all about the intuition. Pluto was about having to memorize. And now we're looking at Uranus. For me, Uranus is about experiencing. So it's about understanding a principle, applying it, and then learning it because you're experiencing it. Yeah, it's like learning through experiencing. In the last lesson, Pluto, you had to memorize the qualities. It was, it was a bit more difficult to experience them. And in Neptune, it was about intuiting the qualities. But in Uranus, it's about understanding the principles and then just practicing and learning through experience. So what we're going to look at today are the aspects and the specific colored lines and patterns in the middle. So here we have my chart again. So this is the symbol for Uranus, and it rules the sign of Aquarius. So Aquarius, again, is like, if you ever meet Aquarians, they're great explorers of the mind, and they love anything new, especially technology. And the key quality of Aquarius is freedom. And if you think about it, once Uranus was be able to break beyond that boundary of Saturn, wow, it was like this infinite universe of freedom. So freedom is a very core word for Uranus and Aquarius. Aquarius, it's an air sign, so it's a very mental sign. It's a fixed sign. So you think about scientists, they just keep doing the experiments. Edison, he didn't develop his light bulb until he'd had 10,000 so-called failures that he said they weren't really failures. They were just showing me the next step. So this sense of you just keep going, keep experimenting, just keep going. It's a very fixed air sign quality. And it rules the 11th house. Now, the 11th house is very much about groups and communities. It's like-minded individuals. And so Aquarius has this sense of equality about it. It like recognizes that individuality in each person, and we are drawn towards the people that we resonate to. So that's very much the 11th house, the house of groups and like-minded people, communities. And Aquarius also embodies that principle. So that's why it's so interesting at the moment with Pluto moving into Aquarius, because you'll see that there's so many community projects arising. A friend of mine's lived in the same block of flats for 30 years, and he said, suddenly we've got a committee and everybody wants to help each other out and work together. He said it's never been like that before. It didn't even know other people who lived in the block. And there's a real sort of surgence or resurgence of community spirit, of people wanting to work in community. And we've had this Pluto in, sorry, a bit shadows there. We've had this Pluto in Capricorn, which has been this very much top-down authority. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, which we'll be doing soon. And now we have this bottom-up, this community resource where we're all equal, we all input equally, and the power comes from the group, from the collective, rather than top-down. And that's very Aquarius and very 11th house. And what Uranus is going to teach you about is the aspects and their patterns. There are 4 colors of aspects. The first ones are red. They're quite challenging. They make us work. They make us try to figure something out. We have to solve a problem. And then we have blue, and these are much more easy flowing. That doesn't mean to say, though, that they're always nice. Because you could have two planets who are decided to create some trouble, but they'll work together quite well and quite harmoniously in creating that trouble. But in general, it's a flowing, easy aspect. Then we have the green aspect, which are more questioning. They're more like learning, like either through being given information or through learning through experience. And then we have the orange aspects, which are about merging, where two or more planets will merge together. Their impact will be combined. They can't work separately. They have to work together as a two or a threesome, or even four or fivesome sometimes. So if we now look at these aspects, they're all based on 30 degrees. So the smallest aspect is a 30-degree aspect. So if you're aware from school geometry, you've got a circle, it's 360 degrees, or a clock, and you divide it into 12, and each segment is 30 degrees. And the small green aspect is called a semisextile. And then we have double the 30, you have 60 degrees. This is the short blue aspect, and this is called a sextile. And then we have the 90-degree aspect, so that's a sort of right angle, but the aspect is drawn on a slope like this, and that's red, and that's called a square. And then we have 120 degrees, which again is blue, and that's called a trine. And then we have 150 degrees, which is another green aspect, and is called a quincunx. And then we have the red opposition, 180 degrees. Now, I'm not expecting you to remember all these names immediately, but it's useful to understand the energy of the colors and the degrees that they represent. So we have two red aspects, the opposition and the square, two blue aspects, the trine and the sextile, two green aspects, the quincunx and the semisextile, and then we have one orange aspect, which is effectively no degrees. They're on top of each other, although they can have a little bit of separation, and that's called a conjunction. So the conjunctions are where we have two or more planets on top of each other. And depending on the planet, the size of how far apart they can be varies. So whenever it involves the sun or the moon, they can be the maximum furthest apart. But with the outer planets, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, they can't, the separation can't be very big for those. And it's always marked as an orange block. Sometimes it will be a rectangular block, like I've shown here, and sometimes it will look like an orange triangle. And in the same way that we have some of the aspects are dotted, some of the long aspects are dotted, or we have the orange triangle, that's because for one planet, it has a bigger angle of separation possible than the other planet. So we say that this angle of separation is called the orb. So it may be that the angle with a smaller orb, sits within the orb of the planet that has a bigger orb, that the planet with the bigger orb doesn't sit within the planet with the smaller orb. And we see that with either a dotted line, if it's an aspect like that, or an orange triangle, if it's an orange block. But honestly, don't worry about that too much. The main thing you understand is that if you've got an orange block, it's because the planets are sitting on top of each other, and they can't work independently. They have to work together as a couple or as a team or a group. So if we look in my chart, I have two oppositions. I have Jupiter opposite the Sun. So this is Jupiter here, and this is the Sun. Now, it does mean, like a conjunction, they don't work independently, but they're face off to each other. A bit like the full moon. A full moon is an opposition. It's where the moon and the sun are opposing each other. They're as far away as they can get from each other in the chart. And it's like they're mirroring each other. And oppositions can be quite problematic because we can look at one and go, I don't like what I see in you. But of course, it's a bit like when we meet somebody and we go, I don't like that in that person. Then we have to look in ourselves and go, so they're just mirroring to me what I don't like in myself. And that's very much the case with oppositions. And the trick with oppositions is to somehow to bring them together, to understand that they are in opposing signs. So in this case, Pisces and Virgo, they're in opposite signs, and opposite signs always have a correspondence with each other. The one sign needs to learn from the other sign. So the Pisces-Virgo axis is very much what we might think of as the healing axis, where Virgos are the healers and Pisces are the compassionate ones. So Pisces, the compassion, needs to understand, and also Virgo is about discrimination. So Pisces needs to learn to discriminate. Pisces, so empath, needs to learn to discriminate when it's okay to just give energy. And Virgo equally can be very analytical, and it needs to understand when it needs to be more compassionate and not so judgmental. So this is a constant theme that I work with, particularly around my own self-judgment. Oh, well, you didn't do that good enough, or you're not good enough at this, and blah, blah, blah. And I have to constantly work at this and have some more compassion for myself. But equally, I need to understand that I have these healing abilities and that I need to have some boundaries because, I'm an empath. I can just fall over myself trying to help everybody. And then I have another opposition between, this is called the North Node. It's not actually a planet. It's a position in the sky of where the ecliptic of the sun crosses the ecliptic of the moon. And you get 2 points opposite each other. And this is called the nodal axis. We're going to look at this in lesson 10, but just for now, we've got a north node and a south node. The north node is like our direction of where we're going, and the south node is where we're coming from. I don't want to go into much more detail with that here now, but I have this opposition. Now, there is always an opposition between the north and the south node because they're bang opposite each other, but we don't mark it in a chart unless there is a planet sitting on the south node. And in which case I have Mars sitting on the south node. If I only had something on the north node, it would be a conjunction. There wouldn't be an opposition there. There's only an opposition aspect because I have Mars sitting on the south node. And whenever a planet sits on a node, it sort of pulls the energy to that end of the nodal axis. So Mars is tending to pull me to that end of the nodal axis. So there we have, I have 2 oppositions, and then I have 3 squares. So where an opposition is facing off to each other, a bit like a battery, the positive and negative on the battery, this opposite, this polarity creates energy, it creates dynamism. It makes us do something because it's so tense. Whereas a square is at right angles, and we can see more the other person's perspective on a square. It's like they're not so far away. And although it may be challenging, well, you're not like me, but there is more of a sense of, but maybe I could see your point of view. You know, in a counseling situation, they always say never sit opposite each other, always sit at right angles to each other. It gives that sense more that you can come to a point of resolution more easily through a square, although it's still tense, and especially depending on what planets are involved. So I have Saturn square my Venus, Mercury. As we'll find out, Saturn about boundaries, tends to limit, tends to hold, tends to control. So this lovely Venus, Mercury, it's all about creativity and floating off into a daydream. Saturn's going, no, come back, control. And I'm constantly having to work with that to find Saturn to work with it in a different way. It's like, no, I don't want to stop daydreaming, but help me organize that. Help me organize my creativity, make it more structured in a bit. And then I have Neptune, Uranus square. Now you'll notice this square doesn't actually join up with anything else. Neptune only joins up with Uranus. Uranus only joins up with Neptune. We're going to come back to that in a minute. So this is a generational aspect because Neptune and Uranus move so slowly. So everybody around my age had this Neptune-Uranus square. And again, there's, you know, a little bit of having to work this out together. But when I do, it's like, I think this is my genius quality. We all have a genius quality, but I have to work with it. I have to work at it. I have to get them to work together. And then I have Pluto square Mars. Now, these are two yang planets. They're about the will. And this can be quite problematic if they're working at very low vibration. This can be, you know, my will versus thy will. You know, I remember as a child, you know, this sense of like control that my mother had over me. And I was like, no, no, no. You know, I wasn't allowed to say that, but I felt it so strongly inside. This sense of combat. Pluto and Mars together is quite combative. At a very low vibration level. It also can represent abuse at a very low vibration level. But at a high vibration level, wow, this is extraordinary energy. I see this as my Duracell battery, particularly because Mars is in Taurus, which is fixed Earth, and will just keep going, keep going, keep going. And of course, Pluto is also in a fixed sign. You'll notice that all the red aspects will be in the same quality. So I have this square is immutable, this square is in fixed, and this square is also in fixed. So that's where they can see a similarity in each other. You're the same quality as me. You might be a different element, but you are the same quality. And it's the same with the oppositions. They're in the same quality as each other. So they sort of recognize either that initiating cardinal energy, or they recognize that fixed building energy, or they recognize that mutable, let's move things on type energy. So I had two red oppositions and 3 red squares. So in total, I have 5 red aspects. And then we look at the blue aspects. Now, I don't have any sextiles in my chart. You may have. That's the short blue ones. But I have 4 trines, the 120-degree aspects. And with trines, they will always be in the same element. North Node is in water, and my sun is in water. And then obviously all this group is in water, and it trines my moon that is in water. And then I have another trine between Jupiter, which is in an earth sign, and Mars, which is also in an earth sign, Taurus, Virgo and Taurus. So the trines always connect elements together. The sextiles not. The sextiles, because they're actually, if you think about it, every sign is 30 degrees. There's 12 signs in the whole circle, so each sign is 30 degrees. So a sextile is 60 degrees. So a sextile joins alternative signs together. And loosely, alternative signs are of the same gender. So if we start with Aries as a masculine sign, then Taurus is feminine, Gemini is masculine. It alternates like that. Feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine. So a sextile will combine the same genders of signs. You don't hear people talk about that very much. But the fact that they trines bring in the same elements is important. So I have a total of 4 blue aspects. And then we look at my greens, and I have 1 long green, a quincunx, and 1 short green, a semi-sextile. So I have between Saturn and the moon, and Jupiter and Pluto. The short semi-sextiles are more sort of like learning information that is given to you, whereas the long quincunxes are having to learn by trial and error, having to learn through, you know, they can be quite confusing because sometimes something can appear okay, and then that person will do something and you go, oh, that's not what I thought. It's almost like you're listening to the words and then you look at the actions. Oh, they don't match the words. And I have 2 green aspects. Now, the ideal ratio of aspect colors is 2 red to 1 green to 3 blue. It doesn't matter whether you've got 6 red, 3 green, and 9 blue. It's the ratio that's important. And that is the ideal sort of energy balance. Of course, most people don't have an ideal ratio. And it's the discrepancies from the ratio that give you the information that you're looking for in a chart. So as I said, red is challenging, blue is easy, green questioning, and orange is merging. We don't include the orange aspects in the ratio. So for me, I have 5 red, 2 green, and 4 blue. Now let's call the green like the ratio number that we're balancing each side on. So ideally, I should have 4 red, 2 green, and 6 blue. So you can then see I'm a bit high on the red and low on the blue. And when people have more red, they're quite hard workers. They just keep going. If people have too much green, they tend to be hypersensitive. It's like they've just got too much information coming and it's really hard to make a decision. If they have too much blue, it can make them quite laid back and like, yeah, I will do it tomorrow. I met this woman once who had virtually all blue aspects in her chart, and we were going for a picnic. So we got there in the morning and we're preparing the picnic. Well, the picnic wasn't ready till about 6 o'clock in the evening because she didn't stop working on making this picnic, but she kept being distracted by other things. There was no sense of urgency whatsoever. So that's what we're looking for, this ratio. People who are very high red and green but low blue find it really hard to chill out. They'll just keep going. They'll just keep going. It's the blue that makes us go, I've worked really hard. Now I'm going to reward myself with a rest or go and do something pleasurable, a hobby or something like that. So now what we're going to look at is the shaping of the aspects, how they join up with each other. And by that, I only mean where they join up at the planets. It's not where they cross in the middle of the chart. It's only where they meet at specific planets. So if you have a chart where you've got aspects like my Uranus Neptune, remember I said to you, they don't join up with anything else. Or you could have an aspect that starts at one planet, goes up to another planet, and then another aspect comes down to another planet, and then it goes off to another planet. But they don't create a shape at the angles, if you see what I mean. It's like this only crossing in the middle of the chart. And this is called a linear chart, but we're going to call it a cardinal chart because people who have, well, we all have a mix of these different shapings, but cardinal shaping is quite initiating. They're very goal orientated. So it's like they'll climb a mountain and they'll go, oh, there's another mountain over there. It's even higher. And so there's no satisfaction in what they've done. It's like, no, I've got to go and get the next one now. It's like they're constantly goal orientated all the time. And this is where you get single aspects that don't join to anything else, or you get like a zigzag pattern. And then we have what are called the fixed patterns. And this is where you get 4 or more, can be 5 or even 6 aspects that create a quadrilateral or a 5-sided or 6-sided shape. And this can be a square or a rectangle or a kite shape, or even a quite irregular quadrilateral shape. And when we see this, it's very security orientated. It's like they have to know where they stand. They have to have something to keep them feeling secure. And then we have the mutable shape. And this is always a 3-sided, a triangle. Can be any shaped triangle, but it will always be a triangle. And this is much more flexible, is goal orientated, but it's like, oh, I was doing this goal, but actually it's changed now. I think I'm going to change it to this goal now. It's like things have changed. I'm going to move on. So here again, we have this sense of cardinal, fixed, and mutable, initiating, security, building something that you can rely on that feels secure, or mutable, being able to change and go with something else. So the next thing to do is to look to see how these aspects join up with each other and the color combinations of the shapes that they form. So first of all, you want to look at how many cardinal patterns you have, these isolated aspects or aspects that just zigzag. So in my chart, you can see I've got one linear pattern here. So you can see I've got this quite complex pattern where it goes up down, and then back up again. Now, there is a blue one joining these two, but they don't join across here. So it's not a full pattern. This is still what we would call a cardinal pattern, a zigzag pattern. So basically, I have two cardinal shapes in my chart. And then we look at the fixed shapes, and I don't have any fixed shapes in my chart. I don't have any 4 or more sided shapes, but I do have the mutable shapes, the triangles. So I have this one, which is one of each color aspect. It's called a learning triangle, red, green, and blue. And this is a large learning triangle. And then I have a smaller learning triangle of red, green, and blue. So what you need to now do is add up how many cardinal shapes you have, how many fixed shapes you have, and how many mutable shapes that you have. There is no ideal for this, it just is what it is. However, if you have more cardinal, like I had quite a lot of cardinal there, then it means I'm quite an initiating person. Now remember, in the Pluto lesson, I didn't have much cardinal in the way of signs, planets and signs. So this cardinal energy in my aspect shaping counterbalances some of that lack of cardinal energy that I had in the planets in the elements. And then I don't have any fixed shapes, but remember, I had quite a lot of fixed energy, fixed cardinal quality in terms of the signs that my planets were in. So again, there's a bit more of a balance going on. And then I have two mutable shapes. So I have two cardinal shapes and two mutable shapes. So they're sort of equal. There are so many combinations of aspect patterns, and I am not expecting you to remember them all. Remember, this is a Uranus lesson. This is about learning through experience. So just by counting the color ratio of the aspects, you'll start to get such a good feel of whether somebody has a lot of red energy, a lot of green energy, or a lot of blue energy. And then looking at the number of aspect patterns, you'll get a sense of whether they have a lot of cardinal expression or fixed or mutable. But one of the things you can do that you might find really useful is in those aspect patterns, are the shapes all red or all blue, or there's never all green, okay? They never be all green, but you can have all red or all blue, or you can have a mixture of red and blue. So all red are like they're really hard workers. All blue, it's all very flowy and easy, and it's like an inherent talent, a natural ability. But when they have this strong red and blue, it's a sort of either or. It's like, I'm either working or I'm not working. And we call that ambivalence. And people who have a very red and blue chart, they see things as either very black or very white. There's no gray areas in between. But there are other color combinations too. So they can be very red and green. Now this is highly sensitive. They can be very prickly. It's like they're just so touchy, the combination of red and green. Or you can have blue and green, which is like searching. I'm looking for something. I'm trying to find the answer to something. Or they can be a combination of red, blue, and green. And this is the learning aspect patterns. And all of these can be cardinal, fixed, or mutable. Now, we don't tend to look very much at the cardinal combinations. We don't tend to look at the zigzag patterns, but we do look to see whether they are fixed patterns or mutable patterns and which color combinations are in those patterns. That is important. And each one has got a different name. But the main thing to look at is it a fixed pattern or is it a mutable pattern? Is it 4 or more points of the shape, or is it a triangle shape? Is it just one color, or is it 2 colors, or is it 3 colors? So this slide gives you an example of the most common patterns that you will see. Now, I'm not expecting you to learn all these. These will come through experience. But just for now, you can see. So you can have a red triangle. Sorry, that's a mistake. It shouldn't have a red line in that middle. So it can be a red triangle. It's called a T-square. So it's all red, so it's hard working, but it's a triangle. So it's mutable. It's able to flex and to be flexible. Or you can have a red square, which will be crossed by oppositions if it's a tight red square. And this is very fixed. And I often find that people, well, most people with these are workaholics. They tend to have more hours in a day than other people. They seem to achieve an awful lot. Then you get a large blue triangle. Remember, that's mutable and blue. So this is called a large talent triangle. And this is very much about an inherent talent that exists between the planets at each of those points. Or you can have a small blue triangle. It's called a small talent triangle. So here we have an ambivalent triangle. We've got a red opposition and then a short blue and a long blue. So we've got this tension set up between the opposition. And it's like, I can't deal with this anymore. This is too much. And then it will flip into the blue point. Oh, I'm just going to chill out now. I'm just going to hang out. How that's done depends on the planets that are involved at each corner. And you'll start to get this through your experience. Or we can have an ambivalent rectangle where it's all blue on the outside. Remember, this is security orientated. It's a fixed shape. It's got 4 points. It's all blue on the outside. Oh, it looks great on the outside. Oh, it looks chilled. But inside, it has 2 red oppositions. Inside, there's a lot of tension going on. Or you can have a blue kite, where you have 2 talent triangles. So yeah, it's natural inherent talents, but it's driven by this red opposition. A lot of people who have talent triangles, it's just like, well, I can do that, but I don't even think about it. You know, they don't activate it in some way because it's just so natural to them. If they have the red opposition within it, then it's much more, oh, okay, let's activate this talent. Or you can have a bathtub, which effectively is 2 ambivalent triangles like this. And then they are joined up at the bottom as well by another sextile. So again, it's fixed, it's got 4 points. And again, it's another security orientated figure. And for people, if the bathtub is this way up, then they can sit in their bathtub and feel quite secure. If the bathtub is starting to tilt, especially if it's upside down, they can feel very vulnerable, like they're going to fall out, you know, that their security is going to be ripped away from them at any point. So then we look at the red and green. So this is called an irritation triangle, and it's the planet at this point that is the irritating bit. Or you can have an irritation rectangle, which is really annoying, irritating. It's like it's all green on the outside. It's like they desperately want to learn and they want to understand, but inside there's this red cross going on, this tension. It can be very challenging. And then if we go to the green and blue, we can have two semisextiles and a sextile. This is called an ear and eye. And this is about information gathering. Remember, green and blue is about searching. And it's like information gathering, information gathering. Or you can have a bigger green and blue, which is called a search triangle. And it's this planet here that is searching. Or you can have what's called a yod, or a finger of fate, or finger of God. And it's almost like the planet at the point is using this sextile as a projector screen. It's trying to figure out what this planet is about by projecting it onto this screen where these two planets are. And if it has the ear and eye at one end, and then it is activated with a red opposition, then it's very dynamic. To tell you the truth, I've never seen one of these in a chart. And then we have the combinations. I mean, obviously that is a combination of all three colors, but more commonly you'll get these combinations of all three colors. So here you have the learning triangles, and you can have a small one, a medium one, or a large one. And then they can either exist as three-sided figures, mutable figures, or they can become part of a four-sided shape. And it doesn't matter whether it's this combination or this combination, but these are called like telescope microscopes. And it's whether these planets are, whether they're looking down a telescope and they're looking for something to be expanded, or whether they're looking at a microscope for that expansion. And that you would have to talk to the individual to see how they're experiencing that pattern. But again, they're both fixed patterns, security orientated, or you can have this fixed pattern, security orientated pattern, which is a bit more like a trampoline. It's like it's always, you know, in one area of the chart, and it puts a very strong focus on that area of the chart. Again, I don't see those very often. The most common are the red triangle, the blue triangles. The triangles are the most common, any combinations of colors, and particularly the learning triangles. So the most common patterns are all red triangles, T-square, which is a hard worker but flexible. All red square, the grand cross, the workaholic. An all blue triangle, whether it's large or small, which means an inherent talent. Or a red and blue triangle or rectangle, which is about this black or white, this ambivalence. There's no gray areas. It's either like this or it's like this. I'm either working hard or I'm resting. And then the red, blue, and green triangles of different sizes, the learning triangles. These are the most common patterns. And it's something you learn by experience. For your homework, what I want you to do is take your own chart and any other charts that you feel to use and count the number of colored aspects. How many red aspects, how many green, and how many blue? And how far do they vary from the ratio of 2, 1, 3? Okay, are they more red weighted, more green weighted, more blue weighted, or are they, very low in just one of those? So that's the first thing you're going to do. The second thing you're going to do is look at the shapes that are created by the aspects. So you're going to look for cardinal shapes, where they're just zigzags or just an isolated line. You're going to look for fixed shapes, where they're pinned down in 4 or more areas. Doesn't matter if it's a rectangle or it can be very odd shapes. And then you're going to look for the triangular shapes, the mutable shapes. How many of those are there? So then you've got the number of cardinal shapes, the number of fixed shapes, and the number of mutable shapes. And if there's one missing, then obviously the very low in that energy, maybe go back and look at the qualities that you counted for that chart. Do they balance each other out? Or maybe there's a dominance of one particular shape. Again, does that help to counterbalance some of the qualities that you counted? Or are they really high in a particular quality? And then it's really helpful to just draw those shapes. So draw the green, red, and blue triangle. Draw a large blue triangle if that's what's in the chart. So pick out all the shapes, or draw that zigzag. Pick out the shapes from the chart and just draw them. Don't worry about the planets for now. Just draw the shapes so that you can see clearly how many shapes are in each chart. Right, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.